Hey, Gloria here. I am talking about Rule Makers, Rule Breakers by Michelle Gelfand. I read this on my Kobo and I really enjoyed the read. Gelfand is exploring how like much of human behavior is kind of shaped by the strength of social norms, and she is describing the difference through this continuum of cultural tightness or looseness. And just as a quick um, definition, a tight culture is one with like strong norms and less tolerance for deviation. And a loose culture is, there's flexible norms and a much greater tolerance for variation or experimentation. And so, I think one of the main points that Gelfand is making in the book is that social norms are like a hidden force or a driving force and help explain, um, what people learn as kind of what's normal and what's like respectful or just what's fair. And they're doing that through the lens of culture, which ties directly to this, this concept of worldview and perception that we've been learning this term. Just like people don't simply react to behavior, they are interpreting that behavior through, the learned expectations that they have that are directly associated to their specific culture. And Gelfand is also kind of providing some insight around how tight cultures are often tight because they have been reacting to something, like they're responding to something. And she's making this point, focusing on how behavior can't simply be understood by examining like an individual alone or an individual conflict alone. Like we have to kind of zoom out and look at what's the history, what's the context, what are the resources like, and that is a good link and reminder to this idea of conflict mapping that we've been talking about, which is really just like zooming out from like the people involved and also just examining these other things that are present in this specific situation. And, Gelson is also making a point that, whether your approach to culture is tight or loose, that like both have trade-offs. And, in the course, we've been learning that like no conflict style is effective in every single situation. Gelfand is kind of making a similarity, like a similar argument here with tightness and looseness. So this is, reminds me of the TKI framework. And, there's no universal correct conflict style. There's no correct level of, tightness or looseness, which is lending itself to this idea of balance. And she calls this kind of like Goldilocks. And, it reminds me of adaptations, just like recognizing that a specific situation or conflict kind of requires us to just look at what's happening and not just automatically relying on what our specific social preferences are, whether that is a preference for a tight culture, uh, which may look like structure, or a loose culture, which may look like flexibility. So it's just kind of that effective approach is really just kind of knowing when to tighten up and knowing when to loosen up. And I think that one of the things that kind of stood out to me overall and helped me or reminded me is just kind of remembering that like the demand for more rules in a specific setting or a demand for more flexibility or freedom in a specific setting, is a position. And this kind of the theory of tightness and looseness, this helps us pull back the layers and see the interests that are beneath that position, and just and letting us ask better questions about what's happening underneath there. Anyways, thank you so much. You take care.